We seek to understand whether or not the future will be bright or somber in terms of democratic governance, justice and freedom. We wish to know whether or not what I believe to be the defining principle of the times to come, that is equality, will be attained. As in the past, the answers will be determined to a large extent by the choices of the middle classes. It is a firmly established belief that without the middle classes, it is nearly impossible to build a democracy. This is what modernization theory, in many of its iterations, told us. And one reading of the historical record certainly supported this view. However, the historical record is not as clear as this formulation would indicate. The middle classes do indeed make choices that determine political outcomes. It is not a foregone conclusion, though, that the choices they make will always be in favor of democracy. Many instances in Europe's own history, from the revolutions of 1848 to the revolutions of 1919 to the rise of Nazism, give us ample reason to be careful about easy and convenient generalizations. Nonetheless, the axiom still holds that you need the middle classes to have a liberal democratic order. At the end of the day, the custodians of liberal principles, whether these be in social, cultural, economic, or political terms, have historically, if not always consistently, been the middle classes. In our day, we must distinguish between different categories of middle classes as well. In different parts of the world, we see movements, rallies, strikes, demonstrations, sit-ins, what have you, abound. Most often they are leaderless, devoid of organization, and frequently with no organic links to existing political parties, organizations. In many senses, we have a new phenomenon, perhaps the harbinger of the politics of the 21st century. When you take stock of the demonstrations that have been happening around the world, you cannot fail to note that they happened everywhere. In countries that have no visible commonalities with one another. After all, indignados of Spain and the angry protesters of Syntagma Square in Greece are citizens of countries that are being impoverished, where the youth of the middle classes have diminished, if any, hopes of a better future. Israel, where a social justice movement sprang up 2 summers ago, is an economic powerhouse in its own right. Turkey had a pretty good decade of economic growth. India, until recently, along with Brazil, had a steadily rising income and together made part of the BRIC countries, was looking forward to multiplying its national income. Thailand, a pretty interesting case, has been shaken by massive demonstrations, coups and elections that were protested for the better part of the past decade. Chile, the golden case of the Chicago School, witnessed mass student protests that finally gave us a face and a name to recognize, as Camilla Vallejo joined the Chilean parliament at the age of 23. Russia, with all the gas and oil wealth, was not immune to protest by its own middle classes. The Arab revolts, the most spectacular of the bunch perhaps, shook to its foundation an order that not even the most optimistic observers of the Arab world expected to see happening then. That the Arab revolts culminated in the bloodbath of Syria and the colossal failure of the self-serving Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and a coup does not take away from the importance of the demographic, social and economic conditions exacerbated by ossified political regimes that gave rise to them. In all these instances, we saw the rising forces losing the round to established forces of order, or to organized political movements such as the Muslim Brotherhood. Robocops in all countries, standing, you know what robocops are, right? We cannot not know. Robocops in all countries, standing for an ever more intrusive, if not repressive state, use the same tools with lesser or greater efficiency wherever the demonstrations, revolts, strikes, voice demands for a better order, future or politics. In all these instances, the middle classes took the lead.